Today I'm joined by Sara Spencer, an American citizen living in Scotland who herself has first-hand experience of cancel culture. Sara, thank you for joining me.
Yep.
Now, Sara, you were studying midwifery at Edinburgh Napier University and then out of nowhere hit a fairly major bump in the road. Can you tell us about this chapter in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was just last year, actually. I started a training program, a master's of midwifery in January 2024 at Edinburgh Napier, and started out with a theory portion. So it was just learning the art and science of midwifery to begin with. And then after a few months of that, we all went off on our first clinical placements, which was a community midwifery setting. So not quite yet seeing women in hospital or giving birth, but rather seeing them out in the community in their homes and in antenatal clinics during their pregnancies. And it really was going perfectly well. I was loving it. And then we had our spring break period. And during that time off, I got involved in a Facebook debate, as I often find myself embroiled in.
As we all have.
Right. And it was in a really large group for midwives in the making, is what's called Secret Community for Midwives in the Making. And it has a variety of both current midwives that have already qualified, as well as prospective or potential midwives pursuing training. And one woman who had recently joined the group posed a question to this large group of, I think at the time it was 35,000 different members, asking if it was possible to train as a midwife if you were opposed to abortion, and if you would be required to partake in abortion procedures, even if you had that moral objection to it. And the responses that came in were very factual, to be fair. They said, you don't have to partake in the abortion procedures. You are allowed to be a conscientious objector. This is a legal right. This is a right which the Nursing and Midwifery Council upholds. But many of them gave a qualifier to that information, saying that they really wanted her to reconsider this career path if that was how she felt. And I jumped in wanting to kind of oppose that sentiment and say, yes, you can train and practice without engaging in these procedures. And also, I'm a pro-life student midwife. And if you want to talk about how that looks, then feel free to contact me. And saying that kind of brought in an onslaught of different responses, ranging from curious to offended. And a debate ensued.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the other lady there. Do you know what's happened to her career? Has she continued to study?
I'm not sure, actually. I'll have to follow up with her. We are Facebook friends now, so I'm not sure if she did decide to pursue midwifery or intends to. But she did engage with some more of the responses and kind of tried to defend herself as saying, I have no judgment towards women. I would never express any judgment towards women. I understand that they have the free choice, to go whichever the way they want with a pregnancy, but personally, I couldn't be involved in it. And I want to know if this is a career path that would still be open to me. For my part, I was the only one in the comments of some 100 plus comments that stated I was pro-life myself. And people were really interested in what I meant by that. And what I've come to find in browsing through kind of historical conversations on this topic is many people in the UK who do bravely declare themselves as pro-life mean it in the sense that they are personally pro-life, that they would never have an abortion themselves, which is very interesting to me. I think I've learned that the pro-life title is so unpopular that it's interesting to me that anyone would adopt it if they weren't quite, completely pro-life. But I think that's maybe what some people were hoping to tease out of me. Is this just a personal position? Because if so, you're pro-choice. And that's completely right. I applaud them for their desire to get correct on the meaning of terms. but I can't, I shocked them all to say, no, I am thoroughly pro-life actually. And I don't think there should be a right to abortion. And they kind of pulled more on that string and said, well, why not? What do you think abortion is? And I said plainly, and I'm a big fan of speaking plainly and being very clear about what our terms are and our grounds for believing things or supporting things. So I just said very simply in black and white that I believe abortion is the killing of a child. And I think for most people who aren't themselves pro-life very seldom find themselves faced with that statement. So it was very shocking to everyone that I said that. And they, so just those words were people came back saying, I hope you would never use this sort of language in front of another woman, under your care, to which I said, of course not. It's not my professional role to share with women my views on abortion. That's not what a midwife's role is. And then many said, well, regardless of that, I feel for any woman who might come under your care. And I beg you to consider a different career path. These were exact quotes. So yeah, it started as just a kind of social exclusion on a Facebook group, which I was fully prepared for and fairly unfazed by. And really, I just appreciated the opportunity to engage in the debate and give a good defense of the pro-life position within a midwifery context.
But then it got a bit more serious.
It got a lot more serious.
Yeah.
A couple weeks later, when I was back on placement, my midwifery manager in community asked to speak with me privately. And when she said that, I was racing through all my memories of the previous weeks of practice and what I possibly could have done wrong to warrant a private meeting with the manager. And I sat down and she said, I've called you here to have a difficult conversation. I've been informed, it's been brought to my attention, some things that you've recently posted online. And my thoughts were just like, in one sense, I breathed this huge sigh of relief that it wasn't something actually serious and important, that I hadn't, done something terrible in practice. But then I was just kind of dazed, like, why is this being brought to why are we having a conversation about this? And she said, so I just said, oh, and she said, I trust you don't need me to tell you what comments I'm referring to. You know what you posted.
So what sounds like quite a patronizing tone.
Hugely.
Yeah.
And she was kind of an intimidating lady anyway,
Yeah.
So there was no room for me to kind of question or push back. She said, I'm going to have to raise this issue with your university. I just want you to be informed of that. And then she said, also, I'd like you to read this. And she handed me the Nursing Midwifery Council guidance on use of social media, which is something I was already thoroughly familiar with because we were told to familiarize ourselves with these policies prior to going into practice. But she handed that to me and she said, that's all. Just wanted to keep you in the loop and I'll be moving forward with your university on the matter.
So, Sarah, you mentioned the 100+ people in the comments who were essentially against you. That's 100+ people who were scandalized by the mere fact that you were a midwife speaking out for life, essentially. That's what it really boils down to.
Yeah, absolutely. And their framing of it, which I'm very sympathetic to because it's these completely diametrically opposed worldviews. Their framing was midwife means with woman in Latin. So you're not with baby. Your whole focus should be on supporting the woman. And if the woman wants to end a pregnancy, your job is to be with woman, which is, it's completely inaccurate. It sounds really powerful and it sounds sensible. And I could understand why so many would think, oh, well, that's it. That's a nice, clean, simple answer. I know what to think about this topic in the future. But in my part and how I challenged it was actually in practice, I think we all know intuitively and officially we have 2 patients to care for. And surely we can get into discussions about when the life of the mother or the health of the mother is at risk whose health do we prioritize? And this question comes up in myriad ways. If the woman is facing diabetes during the pregnancy, if she has a pre-existing epilepsy condition, can she continue taking her medication even though that might cause harm to the baby, but not taking it might cause harm to the baby? There are so many complicated medical questions which we can discuss, but simply saying, well, no, the baby should always be the last thing on our minds. We are here with woman, I think is a really improper, inaccurate, and dangerous way to think. But when it comes to the topic of abortion, that's the answer that's given quite confidently and simply.
Yeah, so this is a contemporary reframing of what it means to be a midwife, to the complete exclusion of the unborn child with sole focus on the woman. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, Sarah, as you alluded to earlier, that confusion arose because of your use of the term pro-life. I think that's maybe an argument for us as pro-lifers to maybe use the term anti-abortion more, to just be clearer, because that would have, I mean, your situation would have been played out similarly, I'm sure, but it would have cleared up a lot of confusion.
No, I agree. I'm very sympathetic with that as well. I hate how the anti-pro-life talking point is, oh, and are you pro every other person's life? And are you feeding all the, I think it shifts the goalposts. It changes the topic of the conversation. Ultimately, I'm just against killing tiny humans.
Exactly, yes. Now, Sarah, for me, there's a tragic irony in the fact that what is a life-giving profession, a vocation really, like midwifery, has seemingly been compromised by the forces of the culture of death. How do you personally think that we got here?
I think things like birth control played a large role, just cultural changes, technological changes throughout history. We've come to expect that things like sex and relationships aren't inherently directed towards children, and they don't need to be directed towards children. And so that kind of normalization of there's no inherent relationship between sex and children, coupled with the disdain people have learned to have toward anyone who would question a woman's right to choose. So in the media and culture and in people's personal experiences, you'll talk to a lot of older women who will say, I remember the time that women were going and having back alley abortions, or I remember that fear of not having that option. And they don't want to go back to those dark ages. So that it's just put the question of abortion firmly in the camp of freedom of human rights, of women's human rights to choose and have bodily autonomy. And for my part, when I was in college, as most people in college do, I was venturing down a very progressive liberal mindset and saw all these questions of anything, feminism and pro-choice, pro-life. The most intuitive answer was always the one that seemed to make people feel good and make people feel affirmed. And the affirming position to me in college was obviously it's none of my business what a woman does with her body. And for me, it took someone saying, well, what about the other person's body? What about the body inside of her? And yeah, I'm embarrassed to say that was a light bulb moment for me.
A question as simple as that.
Yeah, it really, really was. Yeah. And coupled with, I said, I just don't think this should be legalized. It's a moral question. People come to different moral positions. It shouldn't be a matter of law. And it was this older man I was speaking to as well. And he said, well, what about murdering anybody then? That's a moral question. So should law not get involved with that moral question? Do you think people should have the right to murder others? And again, that was another light bulb of like, oh no, I don't think that. So then how am I being consistent in my thinking here? And it's so crazy to think that it took such simple questions to reevaluate. And I'm glad that for my own part, I crave intellectual consistency and I crave being able to have the last word in an argument. So when I couldn't respond to that, it really troubled me and caused me to investigate and self-reflect. And I ended up eventually coming to a very different conclusion. I think most people sadly aren't like that. They don't crave intellectual consistency and they don't want to win the argument based on sound argument alone. They're happy to win an argument based on shaming you. And if they think that they feel better, sound better, look better, and most people would agree with them, then that's enough. That's sufficient for them to win the argument. And so much of that was played out in the Facebook debate I was in as well, where people would just say, like at one point, I did make a comparison to, well, should a woman have the right to murder her born children if, she doesn't have the financial or emotional resources to take care of them? And the response was simply, the fact that you can compare the two things is just outrageous. I have nothing more to say to you. There's no intellectual engagement with it. It's just, you are so ridiculous, the end.
It's that kind of virtue signaling whereby one can feel virtuous without necessarily being or acting virtuous. And also good on that man for his line of questioning, which brought you to where you are now.
Absolutely.
Now, Sarah, several years ago, we had a very high profile court case in Scotland where SPUC supported, you might know of it, where SPUC supported two senior midwives who were not able to claim conscientious objections to involvement in abortion. Now, with midwifery in the NHS nowadays encompassing abortion and the persecution that you have just explained that you faced at the hands of both NHS Fife and Edinburgh Napier University, do you think that midwifery is a career that serious pro-lifers in the UK should consider?
Absolutely. For my part, I'm questioning my future in midwifery. But there's a lot to that, apart from the issue of abortion and freedom of expression more generally. But for those that do feel called toward healthcare, are interested in careers in healthcare generally, are interested in midwifery, we need more people on the ground who have these sentiments, not just from even it, like I have a couple of friends who are still training as midwives and do share pro-life sentiments, but aren't as outspoken. And one has said, I don't have that bravery. I'm going to keep my head down and get through the program.
Understandable.
And it's very understandable. But even her presence in training on like a spiritual level, is valuable. And the fact that she's committing these babies and these women to prayer and not being one more person mindlessly parroting very pro-choice sentiments, it's so valuable. And so I would definitely entreat people to go, not let their pro-life views keep them out of healthcare or keep them out of midwifery. We need you. Babies need you. Mothers who aren't certain need you. But I would temper that and say that personally, I think I'm not convinced that the rights of conscientious objectors in Scotland are on hugely solid ground. I think it's pure luck that we still have the ability to conscientiously object at all. Most midwives in practice don't think that it should be a right that people have. They think it's a dereliction of duty. They think it's like some of the comments on this Facebook debate were, I am disgusted that any midwife would put her religious position above her duty of care. So that's what it's seen like. It's seen as you're just being this bigot and you're prioritizing your bigotry over someone's health. How dare you? You have no place in healthcare. So you to me, that says that things might change in the future. I'm not sure that midwives in Scotland and perhaps in the UK generally will continue to be granted the protection of conscientious objection. In the meantime, you do have that legal right. You can utilize it. You can go into practice knowing that you will not have to partake in abortions, but socially you will most likely be seen as a pariah, be seen as someone who's not fit for the role. And that's really difficult to handle. So go in with both eyes open.
Yes. So you'd encourage pro-lifers considering a career in midwifery to, without compromising on their principles, on their pro-life beliefs, to be prudent at least.
Yeah.
That sort of balance. Now, Sarah, your case even caught the attention of Fox News, as I'm sure you saw. How would you say that the free speech situation here in the UK, and particularly in Scotland in your context, compares with that of the US?
Yeah, we're in a bit of a dire position. But there's a very different culture here, I've noticed. In America, we hugely value freedom of expression. And even on a temperamental basis, I think we are very prepared to freely express. And that's just as part of who we are. It's not an inherently offensive thing to do. Engaging in arguments is normal and good.
And it's refreshing.
Yeah, refreshing and friendly and relationship building, and intellectually responsible. I've found that that's not the case here. Yeah, and at so many times I felt like, am I just being seen as too pro-life, or am I being seen as too argumentative, period? Like, am I being seen as too outspoken, period? And it's just not what's done here. So I think that kind of feeds into it. And, historical realities of how people value freedom of speech in this country, I think is just very different. And I think people prefer here the right of freedom from offense, which is so troubling to me. But I think I see very frequently here, people think they have a right to not be offended and to not have to see or hear offensive things. And that's what should be protected above and beyond anyone else's right to freedom of expression.
Most definitely. And I think generally speaking, there is a distinct lack of critical thinking here. I encounter it an awful lot. Now, yeah, Sarah, ultimately you won your fight, thank God, against the education establishment and the health establishment. Would you say that this has strengthened your resolve to fight for the unborn?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a glimmer of hope in the darkness. It was such, so I had to go through what's called a fitness to practice investigation at my university. This is something that professional midwives and nurses might have to go to as well once they're qualified. If there's any complaint against them, they go through a fitness to practice investigation with the Nursing Midwifery Council directly. So mine was carried out at the university level. And unfortunately, I think it's very much luck of the draw. I happened to have an officer assigned to my case who was inclined to think critically and be non-biased in his reception of my defense. And though I went into the meeting terrified of how I would be received. I had spent hours preparing a defense. I'd written up, I think, a 3,000-word statement. And I asked if I could simply read it aloud. And the whole time I'm reading it, I'm thinking, do they think I'm just being pretentious, that I'm being too defensive? I had no idea how they would receive it. But by the time I finished, they said, wow, that is probably the best defense that we have ever heard in a fitness to practice case. And they reiterated that in an email to me. They reached out, I think it was only 5 days later, saying, this needs to be formally approved by the rest of the fitness to practice office, but I just wanted to not keep you waiting and let you know you have no case to answer here. And thank you for being so thorough in your preparation. So it was a hugely touching, lovely outcome in that regard. And it did give me a lot of hope for that, good things can come to those who argue their case respectfully and thoroughly and have good sound reasons for their positions. And some people will have to step back and think, oh, I never thought about it that way, and I don't agree with her conclusion, but I can see that she's not being hateful or bigoted or closed-minded in why she's coming to this conclusion. Still, though, anyone who wasn't in the room, who didn't hear all 3,000 words of my defense, they didn't have the same thinking at all. So when that no case to answer outcome was delivered to the NHS Fife, to the health board that had suspended me, NHS Fife rejected it. They said this was not the outcome we were anticipating, and we demand an explanation. They said, we're not happy to have Sara Spencer back on placement.
They were put out, essentially.
So put out. So shocked.
The arrogance.
Very much, yeah. And I don't know how that played out. I think they were put in touch with the dean of the school, who probably just relayed, we carried out our due process and this is it, period. I don't know. The school could have appealed the decision if they wanted to, or not the school, the health board, NHS Fife, but they decided not to and let me back. But I returned knowing that they were begrudging my presence and not having full answers to why they decided to change their mind and let me back, or why they were so opposed. I mean, I know why they were opposed to me. They didn't think I had any place holding my views and being in a hospital setting with the public. But I just wish I could have engaged that conversation more with the administration at the hospital. Unfortunately, that door was never opened to me. They refused to have a sit down conversation. And so it's not hugely hopeful, because on the one hand, even at the university level, if I could have gotten a case officer that was far less open-minded, and I may have been penalized and not permitted to come back to practice. It could have very easily been a very different story. And then on the health board's end, they basically had no choice unless they wanted to really go down a huge rabbit hole of legality and fighting the system. So I think they basically just rolled their eyes and let me back in, but they don't want people like us there.
No, it's frightening, Sarah, but thank God that your story finished the way it did. And also, I think you should take pride in the fact that you did get the chance to read out your 3,000-word monologue and that it had the effect that it did. So, Sarah, thank you for speaking to us, and thank you for championing the rights of the unborn in your life.
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
You.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much. Cheers, Sarah.
Yep.